Hi, welcome to the garden, and today's discussion is going to be about tektites, which are rocks that are formed when meteorites hit the earth and cause a great big explosion. Probably the most significant one that we hear about the most is Moldavite, which was it's an olive green to a forest green crystal, and if you hold it up to a light, it's translucent. It's actually glass. It's not technically a crystal like a crystal that grows in the earth from chemical reactions. It comes, most of the Moldavite we have, actually all of legitimate Moldavite we have, comes from an area of southern Germany where about 15 million years ago, a giant meteorite came in and it blew a hole in the earth, and the heat from the meteorite formed this glass. And it's a very pretty glass, and it can form into different shapes like teardrops or kind of be little bitty chunks. I'll get into that when I talk about other tektites. True Moldavite is olive to a dark green with bubbles or streaks of brown. So it's not like a clear green glass. It's got little things that it picked up from being in the ground on it. But it's the most famous because it's the one that people say has a lot of spiritual connection. It's considered to be aura strengthening, creating a better melding to your psychic abilities. There's a lot of different things that get sold about it. That's one of the reasons why, if you're going to get Moldavite, work with a really good, well-regarded crystal dealer, because it's really green glass that a meteorite made, which means there are a few unscrupulous folks whomping around there somewhere who want to try and sell false crystals. That's the other reason I wanted to do this reading today. Someone asked me about crystals and that there can be fakes made by heating things up or altering them somehow. Well, yes, amethyst and citrine are chemically the same thing, except citrine got to a higher temperature in the ground and it went from the purple to the gold. Or it can be a very, almost a dark brown when kind of in the transition between the two. And there's a lot of people who, because citrine is a merchant stone, it attracts money, and there's lots and lots and lots of amethysts in the world. Uh, People will take it and they will cook it in an oven, and they can take what went in as purple amethyst and it comes out as citrine. Um, it's just a human intervening and doing it what the earth would have done anyway. But I mean, that's kind of, this sort of buyer beware. The first piece of citrine I ever bought, later I found out that the way it was in that crystal, it had been an amethyst that someone heated up. I still love it. I think it's pretty. And I still call it citrine because it got to the right color. But that's a matter of personal taste. I don't buy dyed stones. Um, Sometimes when I go through the rock shop, I find the perfect shape. Blue's a hard stone to find the right color. Certain colors of blue are not in nature. And I go through and I'll say, oh, it's a perfect. And then I'll turn over, oh, it says dyed agate. Agate's something people dye a lot. That's one reason why I like working with the rock shop I work with. If anything is altered in any way, they document it at the place you're picking it up to buy it. And it's usually dyed agate is what's put on the back of the crystal so that you know what you're buying. Um, Back to tektites. Okay. Tektites were caused sporadically all over the world, except in Antarctica. And then one source said there was none in South America, but then another source said there was some from Brazil. So I'll go let them fight that out. Anyway, tektites are formed in what are called strewn fields. And if you ever watched, there's a show on one of the networks on cable called Meteorite Men, and they went all over the world looking for strewn fields. And the meteors coming so hot that when they hit the earth, they burn the soil that's there. Obviously, in southern Germany, whatever was in the base soil there goes from an olive green to a dark green. There are other places that have strewn fields, and they tend to name them after the country there's in. So there's Javanite, Astrolite, Libyan desert glass, Philippinite, and Muongnong type. And I presume that's somewhere near Java too. Um, and they can be different colors. The Libyan desert glass is yellow. And I went one time to a lecture by one of the guys that was on Meteorite Men, the British guy. And he goes all over the world and collects up meteorites and the things left in the strewn fields, and he sells them. And they manufacture them into rings and things. That's where I saw the peridot they had sliced a meteor in part, and it was about the size of a good sized dinner plate, and it was all full of little dots of green peridot that had come in from outer space. That peridot, those things that come in from where they're coming in from, those were all part of the first Big Bang. I mean, that's where that one got formed. Some of the peridot that's that you can find on our planet actually did ride in on a meteorite, because if it makes it to the ground, it's a meteorite. When I saw him lecturing at, it was an art exhibit to show how people use these and what they made with it. They made beautiful rings and things from some of the meteors that he's collected. And some people just get the little meteor and they have the meteor. But he was talking about how, I said, where do you get them from? I mean, they're not falling out of the sky every day, except actually they are. But he said that there's a lot of meteorites that have hit in Libya and across the whole Sahara. And what they've taught the nomads to do, the Bedouins, is to go out and how to recognize what might be a strewn field and how to dig around in it and see if there's stuff worth collecting. So they do that quite often, and that's where he gets a lot of his meteorites from. I thought that was kind of interesting. Who'd have thunk it? Go out in the middle of the desert. Anyway, another thing about Tektites is they tend to be classified as by shape, and type 1 is called chunky, and the Muongnong ones are chunky, and they're just little, they look like little chunky rocks. I don't have any of these things. These things cost a lot of money, and I'm not going to grid with, I have enough trouble with gridding with stuff that's on the earth, much less something that fell in on us. But it says that Muongnong, M-U-O-N-G, Muongnong, has bubbles and void spaces in the middle that are, when it hits, that's how it heats up and makes shapes. There's other things that are more commonly called splash shapes, and those are spheres, like little drops, bubbles, elliptoids, rods, teardrops. And teardrops are very highly prized. I've seen a dealer talk about some Moldavite that he'd gotten, that the pendants had used the original tear shape to make their pendants. They also form into dumbbells and what they call boats, kind of little hollowed out things. Those are type B Tektites. And then type C Tektites are B forms, and they're changed by the heat when the meteor's coming in. One part of it gets more exposed to the heat than the other, so it sort of flattens out. And in Australia, they get a lot of what they call buttons, and they look like, if you go look them up and look up pictures of them, they look like little round buttons with the little flat side. And those apparently in the strewn fields in Australia. So that answers two questions. One is, what is the deal about Moldavite? And yes, you do, but it is a buyer beware stone. You need to make sure that the dealer you're working with is telling you the truth. Why do people want to have a Moldavite? Well, energetically, they do psychic protections and shields people from negative energies and entities. And that's the power that it's supposed to have with it. I wouldn't know. I've never touched it. I mean, I'm where you are on this one, guys. You know, I'd be interested in touching it. But I've seen some Moldavite where they light it up with a bright light, and it's very, very beautiful stone. And it is not really a stone, it's glass. And I read one article and it said, is obsidian a tektite? Well, no. If the definition of a tektite is it's a stone formed by a meteor hitting the earth and becoming a meteorite and creating a strewn field, no. Now, there may be places where there was also a volcano that made obsidian and then a meteorite hit it. That would be a double winner. I don't know if any of those things exist, but that's the only way obsidian, because obsidian cools so quickly it doesn't crystallize. It just is glass. And that's why if you collect or around it, be very aware that obsidian can shard off and it can make shards. That's what native peoples used to make arrowheads and things out of, the very sharpest ones. So that answers the question about tektites and buyer beware stones. I'll mention some other ones. There are other stones that people tend to, there's ways humans can play with them. And like I said, I like natural stones. If you see right behind me, you see that bright pink thing? That's a geode that was cut, and then the colored part of it was dyed. And because that pink, I don't think is anywhere in nature of rocks, but it's a dyed stone. And when I bought it, I knew it was a dyed stone. And I used to have it on my table because it attracted people's eyes. Now you can, if you want to mess with dyed stones, put dyed stones in your crystal grids. There are no rules about crystal grids, guys. You just build them. But in that particular case, I won't use those colors myself because I want the real stones. But it's a pretty stone and I enjoy it and I love it. It's not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just been dyed, which means it's not natural. So that's kind of it for that was a couple questions that had come up. Remember, I'm still garnering questions for the acupuncturist who is coming a week from, she's coming on the 12th of March. I'll have her tape up. I need your questions by the 11th so that I have them to ask her. I also want to let you know that Dorothy Morgan's coming back. She's the astrologer from New Hampshire. I spoke with her this morning, and we're doing it because the spring equinox is coming up, and there's a lot of people who don't understand about the season changes, but that actually, when the sun crosses that line, that's actually the beginning astrologically of the new year, because that's when the sun goes into Aries, and Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and we're going to talk about some other fun things. And we are, I think we have like 56 days left of no planets being retrograde, and Pluto, I think, is the first one that's going to go retrograde. And we'll talk about those things. So if you have any questions about those issues or ideas, get them to me, because like I told y'all, I've studied enough astrology to be dangerous, but not to be maybe as accurate as I should be. And Dorothy's take on astrology is very much who we are, how it relates to us as individuals in our lives. So if you could want to keep questions to things like that, she can maybe help give us some guidance on that. And if you have any other questions about rocks, because I never would have gone looking for Tektites if someone hadn't said, what about Moldavite? What about these other things? That's how I learned too. I mean, I know it's there. It's just, have I focused on it? Probably not. But I have now. And that will give me more understanding when I'm putting my stones together. Anyway, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Bye.